we don't get the full impact of it. And I'm going to demonstrate it to you by the following illustration. I'm going to invite Shirley to come down. Would you please give Shirley a good welcome? Yes. Now, I have selected from among this congregation Shirley because I detect she's a very caring person with a servant heart. And I'd like her to represent you. But I'm, for the moment, excuse me, John, going to act like I'm the senior pastor of this church. I'm the man in charge, sorry. It's just an illustration. Okay. Now, Shirley, I want you to stand before me looking like you're pleading with me for the needs of this congregation. Oh, very good. That's very convincing. Now, capture that picture for a moment. That's the way most of us think about God and priests pleading, even about Jesus pleading for us. Wrong picture. Totally wrong. Not what Psalm 110 is saying, not what the writer to Hebrews is saying. Let me give you the other picture. Shirley, I want to welcome you to come up and join me to be co-leader of this congregation. Remember the servant heart bit. Now, how can we help this congregation? Get that picture. The one who represents you, the one I selected out of the congregation to represent you, to understand your needs, to want to serve you, is not before me pleading, is by my side helping me to rule, helping me to lead. That's the picture of Hebrews 5. That's the picture of Psalm 110. Now, that's what you've got to understand when you hear that Jesus is your high priest in heaven. That's what had really gripped this writer. Don't you realize what a great arrangement? And this wasn't, God being reluctantly having to be persuaded. Like Shirley comes to us and say, oh, please give them a break. They're nice people. I know they've got some mistakes and they've got flaws. And I'm thinking, no, okay. And she's saying, yeah, for my sake, please do it. See, that's the wrong picture. That's not the way it's working. The way it is that Jesus comes and God says, I want you to sit with me as the representative, as the person who pleads and advocates. And we together will rule. And you will rule as someone with a servant heart wanting to help your people. It changes the whole way of understanding God's intention and design. And that is the very purpose that we often think that God's the one that has to be convinced. God's the one who arranged that. God's the one who says in Psalm 110, welcome and share the throne with me. And in making him a priest after the order of Melchizedek, some of us get locked in that and think, Melchizedek, what's all this? Well, let me just leave you with this point. The main point is Melchizedek was not just a king and priest, but he was a priest by special appointment, by special dispensation, which simply means that God normally would have appointed priests through Aaron. But Melchizedek was way before Aaron ever existed on this earth. So how did he become a priest? Because God chose him. God didn't follow the normal routine. God says, that man will be my priest. And he did. And Abraham, the forefather of Israel, actually honored him and respected that he truly was a priest of God, that God had chosen him. And that's all this writer is saying. Yes, Jesus hasn't followed the normal way of appointment to being a high priest, but God is pleased and God has decided he will be the representative of people in heaven. And then we come to the second main point that the writer makes. And that is that Jesus also became a high priest, our representative in heaven, our man advocating for us by his own perfect qualification. That is, that God had in mind that a representative had to be a certain type of person. He had to meet the selection criteria. Has anyone had to select people for a job? Yeah, a couple of, yeah, okay. Terrible exercise. Really draining, very demanding. You get in your mind, this is who I want, this is what I want for the job, and you write out criteria that a person has to meet. And then you go through the interviews, and what you're looking for is someone who's going to match the criteria. Someone who's going to have the qualities and the abilities and the capabilities that you need for this role. Well, Jesus, according to the writer to Hebrews, perfectly qualifies not to be the Son of God. He already qualified for that. He didn't need to be the Son of God. He was, by just sheer nature, by his own being, he was the Son of God. But he had to qualify to be the one who would represent us, to be the one who would take our case, our needs to heaven. That's an amazing thing. And that's what those verses are saying. Let's have a look at them. We come to Hebrews chapter 5. And if you look at verse... I haven't got it written here. Let me just open up my own Bible and read it to you. From verse 7, I would say. Yeah. During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. What's the point being made here? Jesus, first of all, had to be fully human. Yes, he became the Son of Man as well as the Son of God, speaking of his humanity. Jesus had to be a perfect human. He offered up during the days of his life on earth as a human strong prayers and supplications with cries and tears, and he was heard because of his reverence. He offered to God total, complete reverence, total and complete submission. His whole life was one ongoing act of submission to God. And in that sense, he was a perfect human being, because we are not always submissive to God. You know, the most basic law, putting aside 10 commandments, Jewish law, even Christian commandments, the most basic fundamental law of the universe is God and you must submit to him. And Jesus did that in every part of his life. As well as obeying all the Jewish law, he was totally submissive, even to the point of personal cost, of personal pain, of suffering. Even when everything at him, outside him, was screaming, this is too much, he submitted to God. Remember, the great climax of his life was, not my will be done, but your will be done. In that sense, he was a perfect man, exactly what God wanted human beings to be. But the point here in this passage was, that's all well and good for Jesus. But how does that help us? And this is where he had to be perfected, to become our representative. Because Jesus' conduct complied with exactly what God wanted of human beings. He was the perfect man. He loved God with all his heart and being, and he loved his neighbor as himself. But that's great for Jesus. How does that help us? And that's the thing we often struggle with. Again, he's the perfect Son of God. Okay, he became the human being, but he's still the Son of God. But here it says he had to learn to obey, and he had to suffer, that he might be perfected. Perfected for what? Perfected for this role of representing. That's why he had to go through this process. Have you ever experienced the selection of a student representative? I remember when I was in high school, they went and picked this student representative to represent me and the other students. Could I identify with this student? Not at all. He was tall, he was articulate, and he was athletic. I had no connection with his representative whatsoever. I just thought he was selected because he is the headmaster's favourite, the senior teacher's favourite. He's not my representative. And he looked like he gloried in the fact that he was the senior teacher's favourite. I just felt no connection with this guy whatsoever. They could call him student representative, but he wasn't my representative. Now, sometimes we form that attitude with Jesus. You sort of think, yeah, great guy, wonderful, perfect man. but there's some sort of distance. How do I connect with him to really believe that he's on my side, that he's my representative? Well, Jesus had to demonstrate to God's satisfaction, that he was deeply committed to saving you. And so during his life, he offered up strong prayers and supplications with cries and tears that he might be saved, but he didn't need to be saved because there was nothing wrong with him. Justice demanded that he should not die. Justice demanded that God should accept him into heaven. He's perfect. Only imperfect people die. Only imperfect people suffer. So why did he suffer? Why did he die? For you. For me. For us. What possible motive did Jesus have to do this? What could he gain? There was nothing he personally gets out of it. Does that click in your head? You see that? There's nothing in it for Jesus. So he is totally doing it for you. What sort of representative is that? I mean, I can't imagine my student representative saying, I am totally committed to Russell's interests. I don't care about myself. It's not about me. It's about helping him. But that's exactly what Jesus did. And then when he satisfied God, that he would submit and say, not my will, but your will be done, that I might save these people, that I might help them, that I might address their needs, that I might look after their interests, that I might give them the mercy and grace. God said, I'm satisfied that you are totally devoted to them. Well done. Come and sit with me and be their representative. See, Jesus qualified for that role. That's amazing. Such dedication to helping people. So, in conclusion, what more practical help can you get? What better advice can I tell you that in repairing your relationship with God and in maintaining your relationship with God, there is no better helper, representative, advocate that you can possibly have than Jesus himself. He totally has dedicated himself to this role of being your man, representing you in heaven, being there for you, for your welfare, for your needs. And so, we go back to Hebrews 4, verses 14 to 16, which started this section of chapter 5, verses 1 to 10, because that is the author's rule application. He actually puts his application at the start, and then he goes on to explain how Jesus performs this role and how Jesus really is your representative. But he says, because he is your representative, this is what God wants you to do. Let me read it to you from the Message. Now that we know that we have Jesus, the great high priest, with ready access to God, let's not let it slip through our fingers. We don't have a high priest who is out of touch with our reality. He's been through weakness and testing, experienced it all but the sin. So let's walk right up to him and get what he is so ready to give. Take the mercy, accept the help. Is your relationship with God broken so you can't fix it? Engage Jesus as your representative. Simple as that. Go straight to him with great confidence and courage and say, Jesus, help me, because he's totally devoted to helping people who ask. He's totally devoted to saving people who want to be saved. He's totally devoted to repairing the relationship through offering his own sacrifice instead of yours. You can't get a better representative. And you go to him and you ask him, represent me. But there's one condition. It says he is the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. You have to come under his rule. He will represent you, but you have to be under his rule. Now you might think, oh, that's not a good condition. But think about this. Being under the rule of Jesus is not being under the rule of God's law. Many people confuse that. Being under the rule of Jesus is being under the rule of grace, not under the rule of the law. Because the law won't help you. The law just says you either make it or you don't. You don't make it, sorry, you get punished. under